usually the conversation with somebody is going to end up with, okay, so it's a human, but it's not a person. You guys heard that before? It's a human, but it's not a person, because person is a moral and a legal term, right? We've changed now from sort of the scientific definition to a moral and a legal term. But can human rights ever be separated or defined by something other than your status as a human being? Can you define something that's a human non-person? Have you ever seen a picture of a human non-person? If you were to Google it, you probably actually would find an answer in 1800s America and a black slave, or in Germany in 1940s. Because that's what happens when we label somebody a human non-person. So in order to help navigate some of the arguments that sort of are around the personhood issue, we follow what's called the SLED test. I got this from Scott Klusendorf in the Life Training Institute. I'm not sure if he coined it, but I think he gets credit for fleshing it out. So I'm just going to walk you through the SLED test. So it stands for size, level of development. Sorry, I just read the slide and totally lost my place. Environment and degree of dependency. Size, level of development, environment, and degree of dependency. So we're going to walk through each of those. Many of the arguments for abortion fall into one of these categories. So if you can really get settled in these four, you're going to have your feet under you. And that is on the handout that we brought. We kind of covered some of the scripture that I talked through, a couple of the quotes from the scientists and embryologists, and then the SLED argument. So we're going to start with size. A baby's smaller than its mother, so it doesn't have the same rights. Kind of sounds like a playground bully, right? But that's used commonly. So yes, the unborn is clearly smaller than its mother, or a born human, but it's hard to reason how their size is what disqualifies them from personhood. So the next slide is one of my favorites to show. You can tell why I love him, right? Look at that daddy. That's Finley when she was, I know, right? When she was about 2, looking up at her daddy on a nice outing that we did. So yes, she's much smaller than her 6-foot-tall daddy, right? But does that give her any less qualification as a person? If anything, we look at that picture and we instinctively know that daddy is her protector, right? When we have people that are smaller than us, we tend to look at, in culture and in communities, ways that we can help protect them. Instinctively, as humans, we know that because God has put that on our hearts. Now, do we act out in different ways? Certainly. But those bullies aren't celebrated. So just because my 5-year-old now is much smaller than her 15-year-old sister, that doesn't give us a right to kill her. That doesn't change her personhood. So why would that apply to a child that's in the womb who's much smaller? So a human being's value is not based on their size. She's equally a person in the womb as she is her born counterpart. We don't have a right to kill it just because it's small. Next one is level of development. I love this one. I like to do this one in youth groups because they never like the freshmen. You know, they're kind of mean to the freshmen, or the freshmen don't like the 8th graders. So level of development. It doesn't look human. It doesn't feel pain. It can't survive outside the womb. Because of its level of development, we should be able to kill it. So yes, the unborn is less developed than a born human being. How does that disqualify them from personhood, though? That is a scientific truth, right, that they are less developed. So let's go to the next slide. We are all on a spectrum of human development, from the time we're in the womb until the grave. I would hope that we're never going to use an arbitrary point in that level of development, like has happened, and may even be happening today in other countries, to discriminate. I think of the euthanasia argument that is raging. It's a slippery slope. You know, they always call it the slippery slope fallacy, but my husband and I are like, nope. I'm sorry. It proves itself over and over again, and unfortunately, that is human nature. We know that from Scripture as well. So we're all on a spectrum of human development. Yes, my 5-year-old Finley, she can't do geometry yet. My 15-year-old's a whiz at it. She's getting an A. Oh, okay, well, you get an A, okay? It takes some work, but you are getting an A. She's starting it anyway. So that doesn't disqualify Finley from personhood. She shouldn't know how to do geometry yet. That's okay. That's where she's at. But I think a lot of people will be like, well, it doesn't, especially, it doesn't look human yet. Well, I know some born humans that don't look very human. I'm not, I wasn't even being funny. I stepped right into that. No, genuinely though, there are disabilities and there are burns and there are things that happen to us Will we disqualify them from personhood because they're scary to look at now? No, of course not. So why would we apply that to a child in the womb? You looked like a weird alien baby once. Nobody held it against you, thank goodness. So yes, at some point in development, we don't look very human, but that doesn't change our human nature. And I'm going to be honest, I think that was a little bit of a struggle for me at one point. Well, it's so underdeveloped. Like we know, pretty early, and getting really settled in the scientific facts of fetal development helped me just really, really push that one to the side and stand solidly on truth. All right, next one is environment. So what environment they're in. As long as it's still inside its mother, we have a right to kill it. And I'm going to tell you guys, these are actual conversations that I've had with people. So I know this is shocking. Maybe you haven't heard this, but these are commonly used in the pro-choice world. So yes, the unborn is located in a different environment than a born human. How does that affect their value? It doesn't make a lot of sense. Where you are has no bearing on who you are, right? I came to Canada, and yet you guys are still treating me like a person. Thank you. Despite my U.S. citizenship, I could understand if you held that against me. An astronaut who spacewalks in orbit is in a radically different environment than we are. Does it ever alter their personhood? Do we see them as less of a person while they're up there? It's really stupid when we say it out loud, right? I mean, these are just such silly arguments. Scuba divers that swim underwater, spelunkers who crawl through caves, they're all in different locations. It doesn't make a difference. What about those that live in impoverished neighborhoods versus affluent ones? Does their location make a difference? We have to be so careful where these lines of thinking lead. If changing your environment can't change your fundamental value as a human being, then a 6-inch journey through the birth canal, 7-inch journey, shouldn't magically transform a valueless human into one that has value. It logically and ethically does not make sense. It doesn't line up with anything that we see applied to the born. So the last one carries with it a little story, degree of dependency. Because a baby is dependent on its mother to survive, it doesn't have equal rights to her. I have had this vehemently argued to me by an atheist friend that is a mom of 2, and yet she's just confident that until we get artificial wombs, that we really can't hold women accountable to have to follow through with the growing of their children. This baby's too dependent on her. It's not fair to ask of her. So because a baby's dependent on its mother to survive, it doesn't have equal rights to her, is what they'll argue. Yes, of course, a baby's dependent on its mother, but have you met a newborn? They're pretty dependent, right? I mean, like, they can't even hold their heads up. They can't change their diapers. You have to feed them every 2 hours or more, depending on your child. I don't think that that's a fair argument when a newborn is completely dependent on their mother, lest we start to slide into that degree of dependency applying to born children as well. So this will often be brought up. People with disabilities. They're going to be really dependent on their mother. And we got to walk a journey with a mom who started, day of her baby shower, she got the diagnosis that her daughter was going to have a severe heart defect, likely wouldn't survive birth. She does have a severe heart defect. That ultrasound was correct. Her mom had a late-term abortion scheduled in the U.S., and because of the courage of a lovely Christian woman who has walked with her through all 5 years, she chose not to have that late-term abortion. And actually, what happens often is when you can get a mom to fall in love with her baby, she fights for that baby despite doctors who said, just let her pass. Just let her pass. She's not going to make it. We don't know what to do. This is a really rare heart defect. Dad was saying, let her pass, and she fought for her. This little baby girl's name is Jaxley. She's had a tough go of it. She's developed cerebral palsy as a result of her heart condition, so she's now got a double whammy against her. But she has a mom and a big brother who love her desperately, and they have cared for her so well. And I got to meet them at a park last year, and Jaxley finally had her cool, she's 5 now, she has a wheelchair that lets her be upright, and was just loving the park, loving the sunshine. Her little brother, because he's very mobile, running back and forth to the playground, but he'd come back and he'd check on her and he'd give her a kiss and he'd go play. How can we rob children of that kind of love? And her mama has had a hard go of it. She has had I'm not going to lie to you, it has been a really tough journey, but she has not been alone. And she has had the love of faithful Christians wrapped around her through this journey. Jaxley, because she's dependent on her mom, still has great value, and in some ways, we just celebrate and applaud these stories. How many movies are made about the underdogs, right? That had everything working against them, and then we're cheering for them because they beat the odds. So who are we to say that their life has no value because they're going to be dependent on somebody else? So in the same way that newborns and toddlers still depend on their parents to provide nutrition and a safe environment, parents continue to do that. Once their kids are born, it starts in the womb. What did that scientist say? It only takes time and protection. Time, nutrition, and protection for these babies, and I would argue that's the parenting journey. So a mom can't kill her newborn son because he depends on her body for nutrition. In no way should she be able to kill that same child a couple months earlier because he's depending on her body inside. The sled tactic really exposes the argument for abortion for what it is, and it's bigotry. It's bigotry against a people group that is smaller, that is less developed, that's in a different environment, and is dependent. So abortion advocates will deny that all human beings are valuable and deserve protection. Does that concern you? Because it should. This concerns all of us. Which ones don't qualify? And how do we determine that? The ones that are too small or not developed enough or in the wrong place or too dependent? Because all of these characteristics can be applied to born people as easily as they can be to the unborn. And unfortunately, we're seeing that lived out. So since the unborn and the born differ in the exact same ways, we can't disqualify the unborn for personhood either. And a really interesting conversation to have with somebody if they're advocating for abortion is to ask them, well, if this was a 2-year-old, what would you do? Thankfully, I've never had anybody say, well, that should be up to the mom. That probably exists out there, but it would be the minority for sure. So I'm going to put this premise to you, this syllogism, if you will. It's always wrong to intentionally kill an innocent human. Abortion intentionally kills an innocent human. Abortion is always wrong. It's as simple as that. So if you want to go through a logical exercise, try and find a way around that. I'll put it this way too. It is right to kill an innocent human being when? All the arguments fail when you're asked that way. No matter what's going on, no matter the emotional difficulty, no matter the physical difficulties, it's not right to kill an innocent human being. And we know this because God has written this law on our heart, and thankfully we have his word to help us walk through it.